this project, so I'm just really happy to be able to share it with all of you. So like Dr. Walsh said, I originally learned about social emotional learning, which is kind of what this project is based on, in her ED 250 class right when I was a freshman. And I just remember that from the very moment that I learned about the topic, I was always just super interested in it. And I thought it was just such a cool idea to support both the child academically in the classroom, but also socially and emotionally. And I'll get more into that later. But yeah, so then when it came time to kind of choose my honors topic, I knew I wanted it to be SEL related just because I was really passionate about that topic. So I kind of just thought, well, how can I incorporate SEL into my future English classroom, because I'm a secondary English education major. So that's kind of where this topic was born. So today I'm just going to kind of outline first the research that I did in my literature review, which I gathered first, and then I'll kind of dive deeper and go more into the case study that I completed, which was the actual research that I did about this topic. So the title of my honors project is Books with Purpose, Using Literature to Support Adolescent Development Through Social Emotional Learning. So as I was gathering my lit review, I came across three main problems or reasons why SEL is needed in classrooms today. The first one is students are not ready for the workforce. They lack social and emotional skills like managing their emotions, communicating with others, resolving conflict, taking others' perspectives, and the list goes on and on. Employers want their employees to possess qualities other than the content-specific skills that they learn throughout their education, like math, science, writing. That's not to say those skills aren't important, you definitely need those. However, they also want them to possess the social emotional skills needed to get along well with others in the workplace. Overall, they're looking for well-rounded employees who possess skills that are going to be useful regardless of the job. The second problem is there's actually a major mental health crisis. 20% of U.S. children suffer from a mental health condition such as anxiety or depression that prohibits their daily functioning, and less than 1/3 of these children receive the professional treatment that they need, and their families also lack the necessary support and resources needed to address these needs as well. And sadly, only 29% of students feel that their school provides a caring and encouraging environment to meet these needs. The final problem that I discovered was students' overall behavior in the classroom is negative. Negative behaviors often plague classrooms and take away quality learning time from students and energy from their educators. Oftentimes what lies at the center of these behavioral problems are social and emotional deficiencies. So maybe a student doesn't know how to manage their emotions correctly, or they might get super duper worked up and they don't know how to calm themselves down. They're lacking those skills needed to manage their emotions. If educators don't address these issues, their students may engage in even worse behavior. In fact, 30% of high school students engage in multiple high-risk behaviors, such as substance abuse, teen pregnancy, or dropping out of school altogether. So social emotional learning can actually solve all of these issues. But before we get into that, I first want to talk about what exactly SEL is, for those of you who might not know, as well as its history. So SEL first began in Yale University in 1968 when a group of men pondered the idea of supporting the whole child instead of just the knowledge and instruction that they received throughout their education. They wanted to support them both academically and emotionally as well. Eventually, this group created a program to do just that, and they put their work into practice at 2 schools in New Haven, Connecticut. After these schools completed their program, they saw a decline in their students' behavioral issues and an increase in their academic performance. Then between 1987 and 1992, a group of educators began the New Haven Social Development Program, which established the social emotional learning strategies that are seen across classrooms today. And then finally, in 1994, the term social emotional learning was born by that same group who created the New Haven Social Development Program, and they coined the name CASTLE and worked to support the whole child by integrating evidence-based SEL practices and strategies into academic curriculum and instruction. So pretty much if you look up of social emotional learning, you're probably going to come across CASEL. They're kind of the head of this whole idea. They provide a framework for it, as well as several intervention and implementation programs that educators can use to incorporate SEL into their schools. So what exactly is SEL, for those of you who do not know? So SEL stands for Social Emotional Learning, and it is a recent educational initiative involving an educational program and a developmental process that promotes social and emotional skills within the school curriculum. So the goal of SEL is to help students develop the skills needed to manage their complex emotions and behaviors correctly and express them efficiently. This process takes place within the classroom through curriculum-based instruction, like lessons, group discussions, individual reflections, and the list goes on. There are 5 key competencies that kind of form the foundation of the SEL curriculum, and they are shown in this little image right here. They are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills. It's important to note that each broad competency of SEL encompasses several smaller important skills needed for a child's development and success. So self-awareness, for example, is going to involve being aware of one's own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs and how they affect behavior. Self-management is one's ability to adapt and manage their thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. Social awareness is going to involve being able to understand the perspectives, feelings, and thoughts of others, even when one disagrees with their viewpoints. Relationship skills is the ability to build healthy, positive relationships through efficient communication, listening skills, cooperation, and conflict resolution skills. And finally, responsible decision-making is going to involve being able to carefully consider the possible outcomes of one's decisions, which also includes taking responsibility for one's actions after they occur. So the whole idea of SEL is getting our students to be able to possess all of those skills to achieve those competencies before they leave our classrooms, as well as also gaining all the academic knowledge that we give them. So there are 2 main ways to implement an SEL into your classroom. At least these are the 2 ways that I found as I was completing my research. So the first way is through an add-on approach, which involves simply adding on supplementary materials or services on top of the teaching materials and activities of the teacher. So in this kind of approach, a teacher must block out specific time to cover SEL topics, and they aren't going to be integrated into the regular classroom instruction. So some examples of add-on programs are character counts and the ruler programs, if any of you are familiar with those. But yeah, so in this approach, the teacher is going to block out a specific time each day, and the students are going to know, okay, at this time we're going to go and do our SEL activities. On the other hand, a built-in approach involves incorporating SEL materials, activities, and services directly into classroom instruction and curriculum. So if one successfully achieves a built-in approach, your students may not even realize they are participating in social and emotional learning, because it's going to kind of be hidden and embedded in the stuff that you're already doing with them. So those are the 2 ways you can implement SEL into a classroom. But I was specifically curious about how to implement SEL into an English classroom, as that is what I will be teaching. So as I was doing research on this, I came across the term bibliotherapy, which kind of inspired the rest of my project, because this is a simple yet effective way to implement SEL through literature instruction. So bibliotherapy is a therapeutic method that uses books and other reading materials to help improve a person's mental health. It's based on the cognitive behavioral therapy, which suggests that our thoughts and feelings greatly influence our behavior. So reading books can provide individuals with a way to explore and understand their own emotions and challenges by relating to the characters facing similar situations in the books that they're reading. This offers validations of the reader's feelings and can also provide personal growth for the reader. So how does this relate to a classroom setting? Well, as I conducted more research, I found that a specific type of bibliotherapy, known as read-alouds, can be very beneficial to students' mental health and further their social emotional skills. Read-alouds facilitate emotional transportation, which occurs when students relate to a character or situation in a story and emotionally immerse themselves into the story. And I think a lot of us kind of do that without maybe even realizing it. You know, you might be reading a book and you might be really happy with the ending, or you might be really mad, or you might be really sad, because we do really emotionally invest ourselves into the books that we read. So allowing our students to do the same thing in our classrooms are giving them the opportunity to explore and learn about complex emotions, relationships, and conflicts through the relatable characters and scenarios in those books, which is furthering their SEL skills. An example of this in practice involves a study by Baksek and Schultz that showed how daily SEL-focused read-alouds improved their students' social and emotional skills. So at the beginning of their study, they assessed their fourth graders using a 14-question survey, and then incorporated read-alouds featuring SEL themes that their students needed to work on the most. So after each reading, they would read a story aloud to their class, and then they would lead discussions about the emotional aspects of the stories and encourage their students to reflect on these lessons. After 15 weeks of these read-alouds, they had their students retake the same survey that they did at the beginning, and the results showed significant improvement in their social and emotional skills. So that right there is proof that this does work and you can implement SEL through literature instruction. However, when I was doing my research, I noticed that there was a bit of a gap in the literature, and not a lot of resources shared how exactly to do this in a classroom, other than the study that I just shared with you. So I wanted to know, how are real-life teachers doing this? How does this look in a real-life classroom setting? So that leads to the case study that I completed. So the goal of my study was to gain insight into how local English language arts teachers in Northeast Nebraska are incorporating SEL into their literature instruction and its effect on their students' mental health, SEL competencies, and overall behavior. So 2 eligible teachers participated in my study. First, I had them complete a SurveyMonkey questionnaire, which just covered some demographic questions, the classes they teach, how many years they've been teaching, things like that. And then they also were asked the reasons why they began incorporating SEL into their instruction and how long they've been doing so. And then finally, they were asked just to share some of the books that they teach and then the SEL competencies that are reflected in those texts. So after they completed this survey, I conducted Zoom interviews with them just to kind of dive deeper into the responses that they provided in the survey. And in the interviews, we kind of just talked about why they choose to teach the books that they do, as well as the methods they use to integrate SEL into their instruction, and then finally the changes they observed in their students' attitudes and behavior towards themselves and others. So after I did all of those things, it was time to analyze my data. So I first conducted a deductive approach to analyze my data, which focused on 3 main topics, which were the reasons why SEL is needed, the comparison between an add-on versus a built-in approach, and then the selection of literature that addresses these themes. So in regards to why SEL is needed, both teachers noted that there's a rise in mental health challenges among their students. They noted that while adolescents have most likely always dealt with mental health challenges, they both felt that teens today face just heavier issues. Additionally, with mental health being more mainstream, students now have the language to identify and express their emotions. Back in the day, mental health wasn't really talked about. It was kind of a hush-hush topic. Didn't really talk about those things. However, today it's very mainstream, and we do know the language to kind of identify those things. Therefore, both teachers noted that students need spaces to be able to talk about these things. They also discussed that there's a decrease in students' interpersonal skills. They noted that a lot of their students prefer to work alone, and they don't know how to engage with others in proper conversations. Both teachers, however, noted that SEL is critical in providing students with the tools to overcome these issues. An add-on versus a built-in approach. Both teachers kind of naturally use a built-in approach to SEL because the material that they teach has SEL themes kind of already built into it. Pretty much every story you read deals with some element of SEL, whether it's a relationship that's occurring within a book or a conflict. Pretty much anything can be related back to SEL. Therefore, you don't really have to make a deliberate effort to incorporate SEL topics. Rather, both teachers focused on how you have to really dive deeper into these texts to uncover these themes and then interact with them with your students. Teacher number 2 discussed how she has experienced great resistance to an add-on approach firsthand. Her school actually employs an add-on approach through the program, the Positivity Project. Many of her school students and staff resist this program greatly, and she emphasized that integrating SEL into classwork is more effective and engaging for her students. So I thought that was really interesting. And then for selection of literature, both teachers use stories and characters that reflect SEL competencies. And this is kind of the chart that I created after gathering all of the information that they shared with me. So you can see they teach To Kill a Mockingbird, Of Mice and Men, A Raisin in the Sun, Animal Farm. A lot of these on here are the classics, which I kind of found interesting because a lot of times in English you have to teach the classics. They might not be the most interesting book, but you kind of just have to teach them. And I thought it was really interesting because both teachers noted how these classics are full of such rich content because they do deal with a lot of heavy issues like To Kill a Mockingbird, that deals with racism and sexism and things like that. So it is those classics that are going to kind of highlight those SEL themes as well. So after I did my first round of coding, I conducted a second round using an inductive approach to identify emerging themes within the data. So themes that I didn't necessarily realize at first, but both teachers talked about them or noted them. So the first one is SEL's long-lasting impact on students. So both teachers noted that diving deeper and exposing the SEL themes within a text has a more profound effect on students than traditional grammar instruction. And I thought it was really funny because both teachers mentioned they're like, a student is most likely going to forget how to punctuate a sentence really easy, like that'll be in one ear, out the other. However, they might kind of hold on to, the things that a scout is going to come in contact with in To Kill a Mockingbird, just because they are kind of the more like shocking topics. So those are going to stick with a student longer, and they're going to remember those. They also noted that students will work harder to understand the material if they can relate to the content. They're more likely to remember the themes and situations within these texts because they themselves can relate to them. And then also incorporating activities that encourage students to engage with or relate to the characters and situations within a story makes the literature being studied and the SEL lessons it conveys more meaningful and memorable for the students. So overall, it's just going to have a longer lasting impact on their students and they're going to remember these things more throughout their life. The second theme that kind of emerged was SEL's positive effect on students' overall development. So both teachers discussed how having students engage more deeply with the text and reflect on their own emotions, values, and perspectives is going to strengthen their comprehension of the material as well as promote their SEL growth. So I found this really interesting that this will help both their comprehension of the text and the kind of that academic side while simultaneously also promoting their social and emotional skills. And that's kind of the whole goal of all of this. They also talked about how engaging with SEL topics through literature broadens students' perspectives in a positive way by exposing them to diverse situations. At least I came from like a small town school, not a lot of diversity. So, you kind of are put in this little bubble. So kind of interacting with some of these more diverse texts and situations can definitely broaden your perspective and maybe make you think about things a little bit differently. Both teachers also discussed that Discussing and reflecting on SEL topics in class creates relationships among students as they learn new things about their peers, such as shared experiences or similar pain points. And then they both noted that that's when they see that negative behavior decrease. So, you know, you might be having a discussion about something and someone from across the room who maybe you have never really talked to before, you're going to find that you maybe share an experience with them, and then that's going to create that relationship and that bond. And that's when you're going to see that negative behavior decrease. So, some key takeaways that I've gathered after completing my research is integrating SEL into literature instruction is essential, but it does not need to be overly complex. It can be done by simply encouraging students to reflect on characters, conflicts, situations, or relationships within a literary work. 2, incorporating SEL into literature instruction has a lasting impact on both a student's comprehension as well as their emotional growth. Teachers should also select text with a purpose. They should select text with themes that their students can relate to enhance their students' understanding of the material as well as their maturity. Embedding aspects of SEL into instruction can provide students with a safe space to process emotions, develop critical thinking skills, and navigate complex issues. And finally, SEL benefits can extend beyond the English classroom. Collaboration with other teachers can embed SEL across all subject areas, fostering consistent growth. And I'm a firm believer that every single content area can find a way to embed SEL into their instruction. It's just a matter of kind of diving deeper into the content you're teaching and figuring out how can I highlight or expose these SEL themes in my instruction. So that is all I have for you guys today. Does anyone have any questions about the project?
Chris, I have lots of questions. I'll start off with the project positivity one. There's an irony there that the teachers were kind of critical of the project positive. The teachers didn't like it. What was it about that add-on project that they can elaborate more on?
I think it was just, you know, they knew, okay, we have to separate this amount of time a day to do it. And it was a very, like, cut and dry program. Like, we're going to read this, and we're going to talk about this, and then you're going to get into a group, and you're supposed to talk about this. And I think it was just a lot of the teachers, you know, didn't necessarily want to take that time out of their day, or they didn't buy into it enough, and then that was just kind of reflected. And then once the students see that, they really don't care either. So I think it was just kind of that whole idea.
And then can you go back one slide, please? So on your 4th bullet point, select text, I think that my biggest takeaway looking at your summary was they're using a lot of text that you said were classics. It's all like House of Menlo Streets and more of a modern sort of a lot of the other shows are I guess, not to put you on the spot there, but in terms of if you were to have free reign to make your own, to select your own text, are there any text that you would love to use in your classroom that promote SEO?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I necessarily can think of any specifics right off the top of my head.
And I'm like, not to put you on the spot, I would just say, like, are you student teaching next semester?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the issue is when you have the freedom, or when somebody says, hey, what do you want to teach? And you say, hey, these are the good books. These books would promote SEL. Then it can kind of shake things up. Because usually, you know, we get in a routine. I'm sure when you saw your list of books, I think you've probably been teaching those same books for years and years and years.
Yeah.
So you're thinking of a couple of good positive books to throw in there to shake things up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think that's the whole key is like having a mixture, teaching those classics, but also maybe every once in a while throwing in a different book that maybe you haven't taught before and just kind of seeing how that has an effect on your students too.
Question. I've not met you. I am Dr. Snyder, and I'm on the education faculty, and this was fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
And I heard that you're just a stellar student, so I'll just throw that up there too.
So let's make sure we're still recording all this.
Oh, I didn't see that. So I know that our State Board of Education has asked that whenever any of our current state standards are revised in the future, they want all mention of SEL taken out of the standards. So right now, they're still in the English language arts standards, but they've already been taken out of the math standards. So the next revision of the ELA standards, which is coming soon, there will be zero mention of SEL. So, which makes me very sad.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated by your conversation there about the add-on and the built-in. So I think in Nebraska, the trend is going to be where we're going to have to be less explicit about SEL, although we all know it's very important.
Yeah.
So how do you see, have you seen in your practicum experiences? Have you seen explicit teaching of SEL, or is it just that you know so much about SEL, because you're definitely an expert in it, that you can just pick up on these things? What have you seen in your practicum?
I would say, like, obviously a lot of the practices I've done have been at the secondary level. I did do a ESL practicum in both high school and elementary. And I would say elementary, I feel, is definitely more like explicit. Okay, we're doing SEL, and they use that SEL language like, oh, you're being a great friend by doing this. Whereas like high school, I would say it's definitely more just like built in. And if you didn't know what SEL is, you probably wouldn't even pick up on that. But yeah, because again, I also think high schoolers, they're not going to be as, passionate about being a good friend. It's going to be more of like, I'm just here to like listen to class and do my homework and go home, that sort of thing. So I definitely think at the high school level, it's so important to do more of a built-on approach, because they are going to resist the add-on approach.
Thank you.
What has been the most shocking thing you've learned? What has like sparked you the most, like, wow, I didn't know that, when you were talking to these teachers, in terms of like their response from students?
That's a great question. Gosh, I don't know. I would probably just say, the part where they both talked about how their students prefer to work alone. I thought that was so interesting, because like when I was in school, if my teacher would have said you can work with a partner, we would have been all over that and like absolutely, like I don't want to do this by myself. But she said a lot of times if she's like, you can work with a group, they're like, no, like I just want to like work on my own. And then also she said they don't quite know how to like engage in conversation with each other. Like they always find a way to like revert the conversation back to them. And I thought that was really interesting too. So it just kind of shows the difference in like the skills that they are lacking.
One last question. All right, so with this whole concept, these kind of, when you use books to promote SEL, a lot of the books are going to have topics that are going to be difficult. I think when I was teaching fifth grade, I did books that would deal with like death and dying as something to introduce my students. And those were when I got phone calls from parents about, brigiditerapia. Why did you have a book where a girl dies and my kid comes home crying, that kind of thing. But I didn't bring in many of the books that today are banned or being, people want to ban, whatever. What's kind of your connection for this topic and book banning? Do you see that connection?
Yes, that's a great question. I don't know. I guess I just think like you said, a lot of books do deal with those heavier topics, and like even like the classics that they do teach, those deal with very heavy topics. And I don't know. I just think it's important to kind of expose your students to those things, but also having the conversation of like, these are tough topics, we are going to be discussing them. Like, if you're not comfortable with that, then like we can have a conversation about that. But I also think it's all also about like the way you approach it, and approaching it like in the right way, and talking about those tough topics in the correct setting and with the correct language is also going to be super important too. Okay, well, thank you all so much again for coming. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope
And